Hey, welcome back to another Black City Coffee vlog. I've been really trying to reassess my cupping skills, always getting better at the cupping skills, because if you're a better cupper, you can become a better roaster. Now, I just picked up a lot of new green from Hacea. He said a lot of things to me that were kind of mind-blowing.
If I can only taste processed flavor, I'm out.
What do you mean by processed flavor?
Like ferment. I want to taste the terroir as well as the process, you know.
And made me rethink once again and revisit kind of just any of the knowledge that I've had cataloged away in my brain. So like readdressing, looking at again like all the things that I think I know about cupping. And this, I think that's just going to happen naturally. It's just going to be like, I think I got that down. Let's move on to the next thing. And then you move on into the next thing and it gives you a challenge. And you go, wait, this is not really lining up, or it's not really clicking for me. And you go back to the step before to see like where you went wrong, or like how you can understand this next step better. And then you go back to that step and you're like, wait, let me go back another step, because this step is not really making too much sense anymore now. So like I find myself in that loop of like backtracking in my brain a little bit about what I know about cupping. And I think that's supernatural. It's just going to happen. And I found I took a while to just sort of really digest and try to understand what I'm trying to understand cupping better and tasting better and all this stuff. But I found these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This was a thing given to me. We're going to watch this. Just, I think the most important parts, I think that you'll benefit from. 7 maybe. Resources and links that I'll include all in the description. And we're not going to go through all of them, obviously, but like, I think we should start here. I've been talking about like, how do I taste defects, right? Beyond like old and baggy. I don't know. So I found this, classicbeans.in, top 9 green defects that you need to know now. I think this is great because out of all of the sites that I was trying to look at and ask and just kind of get a little bit more handle of the ideas of tasting for defects, you know, when we're doing like a roast sample or something like that, this will tell you what full black, partial black, full sour, partial sour, broken, chipped, insect, unhulled, Quakers, fungus, shell beans or elephant ear beans, faded, mottled, streaked. It'll tell you what these defects taste like. And not all of them are like, it's not always a black and white situation, but definitely this really helps in like, say you're doing your sample roast and you taste maybe like a loss of acidity. Maybe you've been buying a coffee for a number of months, maybe, or years, you know, and for some reason, like it's not as acidic forward as it used to be. Okay, or you've got reduced flavor characteristics, weed-like or straw-like. So I thought this was so helpful and just giving you a place to start in terms of what do we look for when we're tasting for defects, or if we're trying to find out, is there anything wrong with this green that I'm buying? You know, either I've been buying it for a long time, or it's a new, you know, importer that you're buying from, or some, you know, getting it directly from the farmer. Right, so I think this was super helpful. And then I started to sort of think about, okay, Jared, he told this to me. I'll insert the clip. What's the difference?
I want to taste the soil and the variety and the conditions and the picking, where like a lot of naturals, you don't get to taste that. You just taste fermented fruit.
So yeah, basically he's saying, I want to taste origin. I want to taste varietal. I want to taste what this coffee really is, you know, before processing and before, you know, a roaster and sort of masks all these flavors, right? Potentially. I want to see what Guatemala is, or I want to taste what Guatemala is, or Ethiopia is, and all this stuff. I want to taste the soil, the terroir. I want to taste the varietal, whether it's like Tipica or Bourbon or Geisha, you know? And it got me thinking about, okay, well, if that's the case, and this, very skilled Q grader is always looking for varietal and terroir before processing, because processing does affect flavor, and before maybe like all kinds of different roasters can interpret these terroir and varietals, and they're trying to assess what this coffee actually tastes like, or is it worth buying, more appropriately, right? More importantly, is it worth buying? Is it worth specialty? So I got to thinking about like, okay, once again, my mind is expanding in terms of what do I know about how what coffee can offer in terms of taste, and how can I break down that information a little bit more. So I kind of broke it down to this. Okay, so you got varietal or cultivar, right? That's like nature. If we talk about something being like, how did it come to be like this? So we have the nature versus nurture argument, right? So we have the varietal or the cultivar. Cultivar is basically like, here, I'll read the definition for you. Through the use of deliberate breeding and intentional cultivation techniques in creating new coffee types, which are called cultivars. So there's, the Arabica, the Robusta, the varietals, right? And then there are certain cultivars, I guess that's how you say it, in which the varietal has now been cultivated. It's kind of like dogs. There was a dog species, and then through genetic selection, they made a Chihuahua from a wolf. So kind of like that, right? So that's a cultivar of a dog, I guess, in a way, loosely speaking. Okay, so here's my little list again. So you got that. That's nature. And then I just watched the Dahmer series, so nature is like loading the gun. It's terrible. And then terroir, which is the soil, the climate, the temperature. Terroir and temperature, that's really important, which we'll get to later. That's the nurture aspect. That's the pulling of the trigger. That's how we can get things to sort of fire and execute on these flavors. So we have these particular flavor notes here in the varietal or the cultivar. That's nature. That's like inherently there in that type of coffee, Typica, Bourbon, Gesha, Catimor, whatever, right? And then you have terroir and temperature, because climate and whatnot, soil. That's the nurture. That's the pulling of the trigger. That's the execution of it. And that is what kind of like brings out these flavors. And then again, we have process. So like natural process, wash process, how long the natural and the wash process are. And there's other processes within there, right? Like processes like honey, or anaerobic now, or aerobic, right? So there's all kinds of process, which that imparts another flavor. And then we have sorting. So whether we're talking about specialty or not, right? Because there's specialty coffee, and then there's just regular diner coffee, Folgers coffee, right? And then there's roasting. That all also imparts a certain flavor, right? And this is where you get like your sweet flavors. And we'll get into how like we can also categorize these by flavor and what to look for, which I think is super helpful. We'll get into that a little bit later. And then there's brewing, of course. So how are you brewing it when we can accentuate those roasted flavors as well? So look at that. Look, there's just so many things. And we're going to get, you can dive even deeper with this, which is so cool. It's like, you can go all the way back to the source, right? And start to tweak things there. And then again, branch off and do another type of, terroir, climate, temperature, all that stuff is included in that. We call it terroir. And then different kinds of processes, right? Where you can even talk about, hey, we're not maybe going to do the highest highbrow quality terroir or highest highbrow quality varietal, and now we're going to only kind of mess with process, right? like, let's anaerobic lactic acid, whatever, process everything so that it can taste like that, and maybe like skip these and sell it for like a high price. So there's ways that people are playing with this, this sort of like tiered categorization of how special flavors, incredible flavors are formed within coffee, right? So much so is like just like wine. So many ways that you can go about doing it. And with coffee, I say is there maybe even more possibility of flavor play because we brew it ourselves? Nobody was really, making wine themselves typically, right? So that's interesting as well. Okay, so that's kind of like the overall kind of like flavor cloud that I've been floating in the last like 2 weeks. Not really knowing like, oh my God, what do I do with all this information? This is a lot of information. But and I was at that like kind of like tipping point of like, okay, but like, what do I do with this? Okay. So I asked Lauren over at Mill City Roasters, and she graciously told me that she found this guy, Craig Simon, over in Australia for the World Barista Championship 2018. So she shared this link with me. And I was like, oh boy, it's 15 minutes long. I know, shorter than my videos, but like, let me sit down and really just like go, step by step and see what is this guy saying. And what's so cool, I already watched it for you guys and I made my notes. So yeah, I'll let this play in the background, but basically what I gleaned from this video is that he's trying to take people through as if it were wine. And wine is like very prestigious, basically, pretty much very highbrow in our culture, American culture. But he wants to bring coffee up to the level of wine in our mind, whereas baristas become similar to sommeliers, where you could taste a coffee and go, and he's kind of hardcore about it. He's like, I believe we can be like a sommelier and we can taste a coffee and go, this is Guatemala, 2018 natural process, Típica Bourbon, I don't know, varietal, right? So he wants to be at that level. He breaks it down into 3 primary flavors. Okay, so we talked about this, right? Like, these are the things that I've sort of figured out. Like, this is all the stuff that you could basically do to a coffee to sort of influence flavors. Varietal, terroir process, sorting. I think I'm putting that in there just because, like, if we don't sort things well, we're going to have defects, right? And that's why we have sorting. So I think sorting's still a relevant thing to talk about in specialty coffee. Otherwise, or maybe otherwise, like, we're only talking about specialty, but I don't know. Maybe that goes without saying, and maybe that's why they don't really talk about it. But I put it in there. That's why I put a little asterisk. I was like, I don't know, but like, to me, I think it makes sense that, sorting is there. Roasting and then brewing. Okay. So he's taking everybody through here. And basically he's saying that there are primary flavors, which come from varietal and terroir. So right here, these are going to be your primary flavors. And when I talked to Jared from Hacea, he's like, me, before speaking to him, made me go, ooh, this is special. And Jared said to me, he's like, just because it stands out doesn't mean it's special, or doesn't mean it's great, or something like that. Roll the clip.
But
it's, I guess,
just
like,
because it stands out doesn't mean it's good.
Dang, just because it stands out doesn't mean it's good.
And I was like, oh. I was like, okay, so if that's true, what do you look for as a Q grader? He's like, I look for terroir and varietal. So these primary flavors is what he's after as somebody who's trying to like think about and judge a coffee adequately. Okay. So I was able to glean from this video right here from Craig Simon. Varietal is a flavor fingerprint, but temperature affects the respiration cycle of the plant. Quote. So with that said, what you're going to find in the primary flavors and when we're affecting varietal and terroir, are citric flavors. So those are your lemon and lime flavors, your malic acid flavors, and I had to look that up, and it's basically like the flavors that come from apples and berries, and those are formed there in the varietal and terroir. So when we're tasting the lemons, the limes, the citric stuff, the malic acid stuff, that is going to be done in the varietal and terroir stages. Okay. So he was also saying that temperature plays a big effect. And we talked about temperature and terroir, right? Because you can have a hot climate, or you can have a cold climate, like say in the mountains, or you can have a hot climate, say in like Indonesia, where it's like hot and humid and stuff, right? So the lower the temperature, the longer the cycle, and the cycle we talked about earlier was like the respiration of cycle of the plant. So you can have a long cycle when it's cold, and in that case you're going to get more acid, right? You're going to get more flavors, more acidity. And in general, in specialty coffee, when we're talking about like really highbrow, expensive coffees, yeah, they're acidity forward, right? They're not all about sweet. And that's why you'll see, like, if I remember in my, layman's brain, I'll see like shade grown tea, shade grown coffee. I would see that before and I'd be like, what does that mean to me? And that's what that means. So shade grown, basically they've lowered the temperature. It's had a longer cycle to develop more flavors. It's kind of like how wine is growing in like a really tough area and it has to kind of struggle. And that's why the wine maybe grown in like some crazy weird climate, but still was able to have a harvest, will have a lot of like depth to the cup. And so he was saying that different concentrations, can create the flavors that we taste. So cooler grown, you also taste more like yellow fruit flavors. So that was his breakdown. He's still doing it here about the primary flavors. Now, where do the secondary flavors come from, and what do they taste like? So we have secondary flavors, which that comes from here, processing and harvesting. So that would be sorting, right? Oh, cool. I think, yeah, harvesting is not the same as sorting, okay? So we'll just throw that in here. So process, harvesting. Harvesting meaning you're picking that ripe cherry off of the plant by hand, right? You're not just shaking the thing like, say, an olive tree, right? That's why coffee's so, special, because literally, if they're doing it right, you're picking the ripe cherry off of the vine, not the vine, the branch. Okay, so during processing and harvesting, that's where lactic acid can be produced. Those are the flavors are produced, and acetic acid. So lactic acid are like smooth, creamy yogurt like. I had to look this up too. In terms of like flavors, smooth, creamy, yogurt-like, and then acetic acid is more like sharp and tangy. Or maybe we can even throw in there, I wonder, astringency. So like the tea flavors, I would wonder if that's formed here. Now, he mentioned in this video, typically you would get big boozy fruits from processing naturals in hot temps. And you would typically get orange-like fruits in processing in cooler temps. So temperature is big play here. So I was like, cool. So again, like these are not all like, it's never concrete in coffee. It's never concrete. There's always going to be something that is like contradictory or is like special case or like whatever, right? But like, I think it's really cool that at least with my mind, still really trying to get a grasp on like, how do I become a better cupper so I can become a better roaster and like know how to identify better and be like, not just, feeling like everything's tasting the same now. Because I've been roasting so many naturals, I'm just feeling like everything tastes the same. And why am I doing that to myself? Why am I putting myself in a tasting hole or cage or prison? All right. So that's why I think this information is so important. I think I'll have to keep coming back to this information and keep expanding on it and keep recategorizing things in my brain. But anyway, let's go. So tertiary flavors, these are made at the roaster. And he was saying in his video that if we consider first the primary, then the secondary flavors, then we can make our adjustments at the roaster. And at the roaster, we create the Maillard flavors, the sugar, the caramelization, the honey flavors. Okay, so that's where those sweet flavors come in, is at the roaster. Now, we don't want to be at the roaster and just favor and just impart Maillard, sugar, caramelization, and honey, and that's all we taste, especially if we've bought and paid a coffee that has great primary and secondary flavors. That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, that's how I'm going to use this information. So at the roaster, I'm like, okay, how do I roast this way and that I encourage or support my primary and secondary flavors? Okay, so that's my thing. So his finishing temp on these coffees, they were geishas. He said geisha. They were geishas. A 395.6 on a finishing temp on all the coffees. Total roasting time of 11.5 minutes. And his words, to support primary and secondary flavors. So I think, after watching this maybe like 5 times and going like, okay, I've written down my notes from the video. I've taken a little book report. What am I going to do with the information that I've learned? And I think the goal is to be able to identify when you're cupping, right? I go, cool, like now when I'm cupping, can I, as the cupper, identify the primary, the secondary, and the tertiary flavors? So this helps me sort of just help like organize all these things that's going on in your brain when you taste coffee, because it's like, first of all, you're like, okay, it's good. Okay, there's berries. Okay, chocolate. And then you start eat, right? After like the 3rd cup or something. That's how I would be anyway. So if you have a problem with that, if you have an issue with that, you want to get better at that, then I think it would help to be like, okay, what are my primary flavors that I'm tasting? And then try to focus on that. And when I say primary, I'm like, what varietal and terroir am I tasting? Am I tasting any? Am I getting any citric or malic acid flavors here? And I put these here like lemon, lime to just, trigger my brain. There are other things that have citric acid, right? Or malic acid. And I encourage you to go look those up. I mean, that's what I'm going to do. But just to give you guys really quickly, like, a starting point on, where we're going with this. Laying out in the video, he's like, okay, first I taste lime, pineapple, passion fruit, or he's talking to those tasters. And then second, apricot nectar. Okay, third, honey, right? So that's what maybe you can do if you're starting from like nip. You can just be like, okay, what are my first or my primary flavors? What are my secondary flavors? And what are my third? And you can just write them down. And it'll be a nice little like training tool for you to take you through the steps. Have a lot of structure in the beginning, and then as you get better at it, as you keep tasting coffees and maybe cupping with other people to help you with this process, then that structure will sort of like kind of fade away. Your own will take place. You'll get more like nuanced with it. You'll get more experience with it. You'll get more like kind of ethereal with it. You'll get more into it, right? That's my plan for myself. He wants people to connect flavor to the source. That's his goal. Just like he put coffee in a wine glass. I do that at home. I do that at home already. And it's nice they blacken it out so you can't see the color, right? Just like, I was like, oh, that's such a great idea. Because you start to form biases if you can see the color of the coffee. So yeah, that's what I gleaned from this. I'm going to drop all these cool little links that I found. This is cool about how we describe maybe acidity, mellow, winey, bland, sharp, sour. So these are cool like words to have in your pocket and really like know how to use them, right? So variation towards sweet, towards sour, towards sweet, towards salty. I love that. Okay, so there's that for you. There's going to be this link for you. Check that out. Watch it a couple times like I did. This is really cool from Coffee at Astra. Probably you guys already know about this, but it's like you can see what varietals taste like, right? So honey, and even processes. So like honey process, citrus, apricot, grape, honey, plum, Cool. And these are all based on data collected from real people using his app or this app or whatever it is, wherever this sample was taken. But it's cool. It's a place to start. Nothing is law, nothing is concrete, right? But it's a place to start. And then we have this link here talking about coffee fermentation. Basically, all specialty coffee has some sort of fermentation going on, but why is one like carbonic maceration? I used to carry coffee like this. Why was that so popular? And are we forgetting about terroir and varietal if we kind of like go too far right with this, right? Or go far in with this? And then here's another link. This is cool about like varietal and cultivars, which is cool. And then we have the defect one. This is super helpful. And then just a little glossary, I think, can help you. Maybe the things that you've been thinking about, they give you terms to that. I thought that was helpful. So, yeah. You can see like my wheels are turning a little bit. Shout out to Lauren for really helping me just sort of like categorize this, because seriously, it was like being in a cloud. And I was like, oh my gosh, like what do I do with all this information? So I think the best you can do is just sort of like, okay, like just like cleaning up, let's clean up the information. Let's put this in a pile. Let's put this in a pile. And then we'll start like refining from these piles, right? Okay, that's it. Let me know if you watched the video in the comments and what you thought about it. I'm really, really curious actually. And how maybe you're categorizing flavor in your brain to sort of help yourself get better and better at being a better cupper. All right, cool. See you in the next one. Bye.